The first Stones album in 18 years positively crackles with a sense of purpose, even if that purpose is to dot a few I's and cross a few T's. Certainly a sense of closure to this album. In fact, they round this set off, befittingly I have to say, with a cover of Muddy Waters' Rolling Stone Blues, the 1950s number that actually gives this band its name. And it's an album that doesn't disappoint as Richards and Ronnie Wood rip through some gritty blues rock riffs, rather than the kind of mid-wind-down mutter you might have expected from a band of this vintage. In fact, we marvel, I have to say, that Richards is still with us, perhaps uncomfortably reminding us that Charlie isn't. And Jagger still sounds great, well, as great as he's ever done, really. Still sporting a face like a chewed toffee, though, it has to be said. And if I may quote from the today's Independent, Jagger bawls and yowls about blurry nights, media intrusion and relationship ructions like an eternal A-list 20-something. And Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards sound wonderful on this album. The guitars are crisp and uncluttered, rather than the usual sort of Stonesy slop we get sometimes. And despite the terrible title of this album, which sounds like an advert for a strip club, not to mention the dreadful artwork, which looks like a kind of Molly Hatchet cover gone wrong, nevertheless, it is a collection of gems, no pun intended. From the ramshackle country of dreamy skies, to the languid driving me too hard, and the great riff around which Get Close is built. And mortality perhaps is on their minds, understandably, certainly after losing Charlie, as they look to bow out. Not suggesting this is the last album, but it certainly could be. To bow out on something stronger than Bigger Bang. No, I quite like Bigger Bang, actually. I think it's got great songs on it. The only problem with that album is it's just way too long. They should have got somebody to cut a few tracks from it. And on this album, I must admit, the band have done something special. Those blues pirates, as Enemy have described them, and they defy convention, gravity even, I suspect. And they are looking to tour this new material, which will be interesting. We'll get to see lots of more of Jagger's lascivious arse-wiggling strut in full vigour as he parades up and down that stage rather indecently for a man in his 80s, singing I Can't Get No Satisfaction, with the same elastic energy of old. Jagger has been the clockwork mechanism at the centre of this band that keeps its heart beating as a Jack Daniel'd Richards just slurs and from the shadows, although I would argue that Richards is perhaps the soul of this band. As regards this new album, we have to doff our caps to producer Andrew Watt. Mind you, he did manage to coax a pretty decent album from Iggy Pop, and he's done a pretty solid job here. The track that introduced us to this album, of course, was Angry, and it sparkles with a kind of a distinctive modern sheen to it. It's a fiery opener to a Stones album, but this is very much in keeping with the Stones vintage, I think. They've often started front-loading albums in this way. Start Me Up on Tattoo You, or Brown Sugar on Sticky Fingers, for example. Jagger sings, we haven't made love and I want to know why you angry with me? He wails to the almost Queen-like groove of this one. This track is a hybrid of classic Stones signposts, I think. Get Close is a nice drum start at the beginning, and it has Jagger crawling about, lamenting the press strapped to my back, I think he sings at one point. Elton John tinkles the ivories on this one, replacing the irreplaceable, I think, Ian Stewart. Give him his due, he plays on what The Guardian has described as kind of a modernist roadhouse rocking album. And I think he plays on Live by the Sword as well. McCartney's grungy bass sounds fabulous, I'll be honest with you, and adds something to the very febrile mood of Bite My Head Off. Wyman also plays on Live by the Sword, which I think is one of the worst tracks on this album. Dreadful hacked together lyrics as Jagger channels his inner John Lydon. Bite Your Head Off, which is a grumpier, updated version of Get Off My Cloud. He rages in his usual rubbery fashion. Ain't on a leash, well I ain't on a chain. You think I'm your bitch, I'm fucking with your brain. And nice aggressive guitar stabs as well, which complement the tone of the lyrics. With Mick snarling, why you bite my head off now. This is one of my favourites on this album. Sweet Sounds of Heaven is one of the best Stones numbers I've heard in a long, long time. It's certainly befitting of any of the material that featured on Sticky Fingers. and could sort of sit quite comfortably next to a classic like Wild Horses. We get Lady Gaga straining the old tonsils trying to emulate Mary Clayton, I think. And Stevie Wonder adds some wonderful jazzy touches to the keyboards. On the second half of the album there seems to be a tonal shift, a more sober mood, and songs that deal with broken relationships. So lyrics like you came to the right place, baby, at the wrong time, doing the kind of disco-fused Mess It Up, which wouldn't sound out of place on the Emotional Rescue album. Almost think on this track that Jagger's trying to awkwardly connect with anybody under the age of 30 who may not know this band. He sings, you share my photos of all your friends, you put them out there, it don't make no sense. He grouses away like Gramps has just been given a new iPhone. And I must admit there's a nice percussive swing on this track, accompanying Jagger's swooping delivery. What elevates this number, undoubtedly. Depending on you, is an interesting number. The guitar at the start is slightly reminiscent of You Can't Always Get What You Want. And Keith's cut, of course, tells it straight, as Keith's cuts usually do. He asks, is my future all in the past? And Jagger croons over the very slide-infused country honk that is Dreamy Skies, running off to a country bolt hole where he probably dreams of Gram Parsons, or Gram Parsons' girlfriend, I should say, where he sings, where there ain't no other human for 100 miles. I suspect he's just been ODing on Hank Williams records. Whole Wide World is an anthemic number, and appears to be an illuminating expose on the more sleazy side of the band's early days, with regret reflecting on that early tabloid infamy, I think. Teenage Brides, Mars Bars, you name it. This song has a certain anger to it as well. It starts off with a beautiful Stonesy riff. Driving Me Too Hard starts with a riff that is reminiscent of Tumbling Dice, and it's a little bit Bruce Springsteen-y, I think, as Jagger details the pressures of a rather trying relationship. One critic has written of the song Driving Me Too Hard that it's essentially Springsteen's glory days after 12 more barroom buds and loading the jukebox with travelling Wilbury tunes. As I said at the beginning of this review, there is a finality to it all, and that's never better encapsulated than the inclusion of the raw acoustic version of Muddy Waters' Rolling Stone Blues, which certainly plays this band's strengths as demonstrated on Blue and Lonesome. A wonderful Jagger bluesy howl and shiver-inducing harmonica. This is a solid album with sweet sounds of heaven, worth the price of admission alone. Ronnie Wood says there's still loads of stuff left in the can, but I suppose you have to take it with a pinch of salt, I think. But if they can keep on rolling, why not? Anyway, what do you think? You've probably had a chance to listen to it now. I probably haven't covered all the songs in this review, but just to give you an overall impression. Other than that, I'll leave you with my usual closing salvo, which is hope you're well, staying safe, and that you keep listening.